Welcome to Frequency. I'm Jenny Field.
And I'm Chuck Ghost. Frequency is your go-to for real talk about comms, culture, and employee experience beyond the buzzwords and straight to what matters. Jenny, this week we're going to be talking about employees running on empty, a big choice facing internal comms, and then a couple AI stories. One about that some are now believing adoption is the wrong metric, and what the biggest threat to AI strategy is.
I'm excited about the running on empty thing because I keep seeing this quote on my Instagram this week, and it's come up on like 7 different people's stories of people that I follow, which basically says I've just found my people on Instagram. But it was this quote which says, "The fake urgency created in corporate life for absolutely no reason is one of the worst things humans have invented." And I have just enjoyed it immensely. And when we talk about running on empty and stuff like that, it just got me thinking about, why do we have this urgency? Even talking to clients today, I was like, we don't need to rush. Like, what's the rush? What's the hurry? So I feel like we're all feeling that fake urgency in organisations at the moment. I don't know if you feel any fake urgency.
Or maybe it's just real urgency, Jenny, and people need to be more urgent about things, about how they move through their life, and not just operate on your own time. Like there's this guy on TikTok that I saw was talking about how he feels like in airports, there's this group of people that have no sense of urgency. Like they're just sort of lollygagging around and taking their time and whatever, not realizing there's lines of people behind them.
Yes.
Fake or not, there is some value to some urgency.
I think that's just being a bit aware of your surroundings rather than urgency. But I love that you can always bring it back to a frustration at an airport. I feel like we haven't had that from you for a while.
It's been a little while. It's been
been building. Yeah. It's been building. Go on, kick us off this week with the first article.
Yes, the Predictive Index surveyed more than 1,000 U.S. employees in 2026 and found that 78% started their current role motivated, but only 16% say their work always feels meaningful. The rest experience meaning intermittently or rarely at all. Clarity of priorities ranked as the number one thing employees say would improve their motivation ahead of recognition, fewer meetings, and more autonomy. Yet only 35% of employees say their priorities are actually clear on a typical workday. Gallup reported the largest decline in clarity expectations of any engagement factor since 2020, which is a 9-point drop. Meanwhile, just 10% of employees say their one-on-ones with their managers are always productive. The most direct channel between leadership intent and employee experience is underperforming, and most organizations appear to be hoping that engagement programs will paper over it. Worth noting that the Predictive Index makes a behavioral assessment tool, and every finding in this report conveniently points to buying one. The insight that generic engagement strategies miss people they're designed for is legitimate, but this prescription from them is pretty self-serving as it gets. We need to make sure we're separating the data from the sales pitch. But Jenny, getting back to the report, it says that 78% of people arrive motivated, and then something in the organization erodes it. If that's true, what do you think that specific moment or mechanism is where it breaks down?
So I really loved the data in the report. I less like the sales pitch on them, but I think we've all been guilty of probably a bit of that. But there was a line in the report that I really liked, which I think answers this question about kind of where it breaks down. It said, occasional meaning produces occasional motivation. Consistent meaning is what keeps people engaged. And that's the bit for me that I think is where it breaks down. I think there's this sort of, we say it once and then everybody should just carry on and know what they're doing and keep going, which just isn't real life. Organizations change, things happen, change direction, things shift. And we almost get bored of telling that story. And I think that lack of consistency of message is what's driving this sort of lack of motivation for people. I also think there is a question about how we're identifying motivation. So when we say that, what does that show up like? What does that mean? What does that look like? Is it just that I want to sit on my sofa and watch Netflix all day and I can't be bothered to do any work? Or is it that I don't want to do this particular work because I don't like this? Like, well, I think that's quite broad, and I would love to sort of get more into that data. But there's another line in the report where it says this problem has been building for years, and that for me is the bigger issue here. Like, this isn't a surprise. Like, we've talked about so many things on this podcast over the last year or so that tracks with this. Like, this isn't a surprise. And if it is a surprise, then people have been living under a rock. So I think it breaks down for me because that lack of consistent messaging, that inability to really tell that story through an organization, and the fact that people feel that their managers don't really care about them. I think that's a huge one as well.
I think it's also worth calling out the danger of words like always and never. I mean, for someone to say like my one-on-one meetings are always the best, like they're not. That's an unrealistic expectation. That's an unrealistic expectation. The fascinating data point to me is the one that I called out where I talked about the clarity of priorities. That ranked as the number one thing employees say would improve the motivation ahead of autonomy, less meetings, recognition, those kind of things. That's a relatively easy fix from a leadership standpoint. Just give people what they should focus on. The other part of this, which I think says like what's the ownership that individuals have in this? It shows us that we have such high hope and expectations when we start a new opportunity, like, oh, it's going to be different. Oh, it's going to be better. And we turn out it's just as crappy as everybody else. Like it's not any better. So the companies out there, just give your employees the focus. Give them the priorities. Let them know what they need to focus on. That sounds like that's where the motivation fits. Now, the interesting part is I would love to know, once that happens, is that the cure-all? Or does then, okay, that's in place. Now we need fewer meetings, or now I need more autonomy. Like, where does the need stop? But just focusing on priorities, if organizations can focus and settle on them, and not say this day, this is their priority, but next week is a different priority, and next month is a different priority. That's, I think, the frustration that a lot of employees have.
And just to bring this into kind of the average employee's day to day, because I think there is some agency here people can have over this. I think it's not about waiting for the organization to decide, but actually, if you sit down at the beginning of your week and think, right, what are the 3 big things I have to do this week? And if you don't know that, that's a conversation with your manager. But having that time to think about what other things I need to do. And it's easy not to do that, right? I can easily not do that. And I shared on here, a few weeks ago about my 1% diary that I'd bought because I needed some help with what am I doing? And I think it's important to recognize that we can have a bit of control over this in terms of what is it that I actually need to do today, this week, this month. And I think we can all do a bit more of making time for that. If we don't know, then it's talk to the managers. But that clarity, I think, with a bit of pause and stop and this sort of fake urgency going away would probably help a little bit.
Next up, we're going to talk about a choice facing internal comms around leading or following. Simon Cavendish, chair of IABC EMENA and a senior IC consultant, published a bit of a provocative post on LinkedIn, and it centers around this. Internal comms has become addicted to alignment, even when alignment is the wrong goal. The argument is that the profession's identity as, quote unquote, the conscience of the organization has morphed into something safer and more comfortable than it sounds, a way to stay nice instead of necessary. One line in there is blunt. Too many IC teams end up producing beautifully crafted messages for fundamentally bad decisions. Simon distinguishes between diplomacy and deference and says the profession is conflating the two. The goal of maintaining access to leadership, he argues, has become more important than actually using that access to push back. Being in the room isn't the win. What we do in the room is the win. That's the quote. He says the future of internal comms belongs to challengers, not caretakers. IC teams that operate as internal agencies are setting themselves up to be optional. This isn't a new argument necessarily in IC circles, but I think Simon has made this a bit more blunt than most have. My question to you, Jenny, is very simple here. Agree or disagree with Simon's take?
So I agree with Simon's take because I loved the way he wrote this. When I was reading the article, it was a beautifully written, beautifully crafted message for what is a brilliant decision. His use of language around things like being nice and stuff like that, I think is a huge issue for internal comms. This needs to be the conscience of the organisation. It tracks to something I was talking about a little while ago around that's not your decision in internal comms. I think I was having a freak out about one of the professional bodies asking internal comms people to talk about how we look after employees who are sick. And I'm like, that's not internal comms. Like, that's not the job. And I think it's got really confused about what it is. It's too, people are really worried about saying the wrong thing. And to me, a lot of this comes back to professional development, right? I'm a big advocate of professional development in whatever capacity that is. But if you're not doing the work to have the belief in yourself, to have those challenging conversations or that judgment or all of those things, then Simon's right. The being in the room isn't the win. It's what you do in that room that is the win. So if you're just focused on getting there and then you're getting there and not saying anything or doing anything and just being nice and going, that's a lovely idea, let's go and do this. And inside you're thinking, I'm not sure it is. That just isn't the role of an internal comms person. And that has been, I think, to your point, it's not a new argument. It's been a frustration for a number of years in the profession.
Yeah. Yeah, I love his point. I want to throw up in my mouth a little bit when I say like seat at the table, because that's one of those things that people talk about way too long. But I like his point about being in the room. And this goes back to an article that we talked about the week before about disagreeing with your CEO and having access to leadership is a privilege. What do you then do with that privilege? So his point around being in the room isn't the win. What we do in the room is the win. So what are you doing with that access? What are you doing with that privilege? If you're just nodding along and agreeing, again, to last week's conversation, you're complicit in it. And we end up being nice instead of necessary. I think that's another good alliteration to play off the role of communicators, how to become necessary and not just nice. Yes. That conscience of the organization sounds really great, but if you're doing nothing with it, then what are you doing?
Yeah. And he makes such a good point about the fact that this is forgettable. You cannot have that. If you're just playing that nice game and doing that, people are going to be like, we're good without that. We don't need you. We're fine. Whereas you have to become necessary. And you can only become necessary if you're talking the language of the business, you understand the organization, and you can advise, and if you can't do that, then that's making it really difficult for you to do your job. And I'm not saying that all internal communicators. There's a lot of internal communicators who are creating content, managing digital channels. They aren't doing that leadership advisory piece. You've still got to be brilliant at that and know what's going on. But if you want to step into that space, that consultancy advisory space, working with leaders, you do not have the luxury of just being nice. And if you're in that position, you are in a leadership position, and therefore it is your duty to make those calls and say those things. Otherwise, you're not leading because you're not making the hard choices and the difficult choices.
Next up, why 4 tech companies say adoption is the wrong AI metric. Charter's Brian Elliott gathered practitioners from Atlassian, Zapier, Udemy, and others for a closed-door forum on AI measurement, and the conversation is that companies furthest along on AI adoption are quietly abandoning adoption as a metric. Microsoft summarized the shift, quote, "We used to pay attention to adoption. Now we just pay attention to performance." Zapier's chief people officer put it a bit more starkly, quote, 97% adoption rates mean almost nothing. The collective diagnosis is that early AI ROI measurement got captured by vanity stats. Atlassian's Ben Ostrowski noted that most of the time was simply reinvested in the admin work or correcting AI outputs. Research from ActiveTrack found that time on email, messaging, and admin tools more than doubled among AI users, while focused, uninterrupted work fell by 9%. Quote, "We never said once everyone uses a computer, we've solved technology." If you've spent the last 2 years building AI adoption campaigns, you may have been optimizing for the wrong outcome. The organizations are now asking, is it making the business better? Needed to get mass adoption first before they could ask that question. What's the lesson here, Jenni, or is there a lesson here we can learn?
Yeah, I think there is a lesson here. And when I was reading this, it reminded me of all of the digital change programs that you and I have probably done in several organizations, where I was always looking at adoption and engagement as the metrics for digital platforms. So we have got the adoption piece, and then the engagement, and the engagement metrics can be made up of all sorts of different things. I'm not going to get into a digital measurement seminar today, but it was important to make that distinction because a lot of teams just want to focus on adoption. Now, you can apply exactly that same logic to the AI stuff, which is exactly what they're saying is adoption doesn't mean anything. Like, yes, but what's it actually achieving as an organizational business outcome? this is what we talk about all the time in the world of communications and channels and all of that stuff. Like, so what? To what end? Why are we doing this? And I don't think that question is asked enough before people run off and play. And I think with the AI stuff, certainly with the clients I'm chatting to, a lot of people are using it. They're using Copilot because that's all they've got. But there's been no talk about the impact that's having on the organization in terms of the benefit that's bringing for the team. Because to the point of this research is uninterrupted work fell by 9%, and they're spending more time on all the admin stuff because it stops you having to do some of the big work so you can free up to do the admin work. So the lesson for me here is, I think you do need to have a look at adoption at the beginning, but I think it's a short-term measure. And then you've got to have the business outcome before you even start the project. And then you move on to measure that. And I think that is a lesson we've been trying to beat into people for years.
I'm gonna take a different approach on this, Jenni. First, I don't know if you're familiar, on Saturday Night Live, they have this like once somebody's hosted it 5 times, they get like a special designation as like this 5-time host, and it's like this special club. I think Brian Elliott's getting close to Nick Bloom on numbers of mentions on frequency. And so maybe we need to start a little special club of people. Once you get to a certain level, you're in this club of mentions. I like the approach on this, but it's also, I don't know, the Zapier, the people officer, the quote, like 97% adoption rates mean almost nothing. That's false. You get 97% adoption in anything. We're not talking AI. You get 97% adoption in something, that is massive. I think it's easy to abandon adoption as a metric if you struggle with that metric. If you're not getting the adoption you want, you can say, hey, wait a minute, guys. No, adoption is not the thing. We don't need to be going after that. Let's go after this other thing then instead. I think adoption is actually a really strong signal of interest. Now, what does that adoption mean? I think that's your point. Yeah. Where does it then go? What's the long-term impact? And is adoption ruining other things? Is it people spending more time in the wrong areas or not the right time in the other areas? That's another thing. So adoption actually, to me, does mean something. It's easy to say it doesn't mean anything when you don't have it.
So I agree and I disagree. So I really like the quote about 97% adoption rates mean almost nothing, because it comes back to the point of like, so what? So what that 97% of people are using it? Like, what does that mean in terms of what we're trying to achieve? So I like your framing of what it signals. And I think that's the bit that's important because it is a big deal. You're right. To get 97% of people doing something is definitely a good thing, but it signals something. And I don't know whether it signals the right things for the outcome that you're looking to achieve. And all of that comes back to what's the end goal. And I don't think people know that with AI. I don't think they know what the end goal is, which is why there's a lot of adoption, but not a lot of outcome or output, and the ROI is not great because people are still figuring out what it can do and how it can help. So it still feels like we're quite messy, but I think it's the right conversation to be having about, why are you using AI? What are you hoping it's going to achieve for your organization? Is it going to allow you to go to a 3-day work week because you've managed, to give people time back? Absolutely not. They're going to go, no, it means we can then make these people work harder and to the death and do this. But that's the conversation that should be. How does this change how we work? That's the big goal, surely.
And for our last article, Rebecca Hines wrote in Inc. that the real blocker to AI transformation isn't the tools made available, it's the narrative leaders are encoding into their culture before the rollout even starts. The argument is that beliefs don't stay abstract. A leader who tells employees their jobs will be replaced turns workers into passive recipients. A leader who tells early career staff that they're obsolete sends them chasing certifications instead of building depth. Hines and researcher Bob Sutton also surface a harder finding from their AI Transformation 100 report. When leaders deploy AI in ways that strip craft and human touch from work, what's left is a hollow shell with little meaning. The motivation crisis from that predictive intelligence report that we talked about and the narrative crisis in this one sound a bit the same. Hines acknowledges that AI tools alone don't build skills and that real fluency requires productive struggle. Jenni, Hines argues that the narrative you build around AI shapes what employees believe is possible, which is squarely in the world of internal comms. So why do most AI rollout comms plans look like feature announcements rather than change campaigns?
So I'm going to come back to a conversation we had a while ago where I said something like AI change programs are the same as any other change program. We're just making it sound worse and more complicated than it needs to be. And this for me is the essence of that. I look back at all the tech changes I've done. You've done way more than I have in your career, but all of those where we've either got it wrong, learnt from it, or the group team have got it wrong because they focused on the features. They've gone, look at all of these things it can do. Look, isn't this amazing? Look, it's magic. Look at all these lovely things this new enterprise social network can do. And people don't do it because it's not relevant to them. They can't understand which bits really make sense. They don't understand how it helps them with their job, all of those things. This is the same. We are doing the same thing of we're just going to do a list of stuff and hope people just go and play with it rather than really thinking about how is this relevant to you in your role and how is this going to make things easier or better. And I think the science behind that sort of labeling and messaging is important because the article talks about some insight that beliefs don't just stay in your head, and it says they calcify into labels, and once a label takes hold, it often inflicts more damage than the condition it was meant to describe. And I think that is so important because we are holding on to labels in our society as a whole. And when you think about that, about AI and the label of that, it becomes reality, and that's not helpful at all. So for me, it's coming back to what have we learned over digital campaigns in the past, and how can we make sure that we're learning from those and not just doing a list of features, because it's not going to work because the outcome is behavior change.
Yeah, I'm going to come back. We're going to find out. I don't remember what episode that was, but I know which one you're talking about because I said you were wrong.
You did.
In that episode. And we're going to link to that so people can go back and listen to it. Because to me, this isn't just your run-of-the-mill average change campaign. It's just not. It's massive. And so it's not just like you said, it's not just about feature announcements and, hey, you can now do this faster and click this button and do that. It is changing every aspect of everything that we do, whether you're not even actively engaging in AI. And this is where I differentiate the two between people that are benefiting from AI and people that are using AI. And there's a lot of people that are benefiting from it without even necessarily knowing or having to trigger AI to get involved. Then there's people that are actively seeking it and using it. I think even getting into an organization explaining like, hey, you never have to click this button. You never have to go to this other place. This system is built to push information to you, to give information to you. I use the example of my wife who uses a fundraising software. She uploaded some data into it, and then the next day went in there and this beautifully crafted report was done. She never had to ask it to do that report. It just did it on its own. And so there's the benefit from it versus actively saying, hey, go create this report. I think that's the education that is missing from a lot of companies, is not going through and explaining this is how, as an organization, we're going to benefit it. And I want to call out the quote that they had about when leaders deploy AI in ways that strip craft and human touch from work. I think that's the part that a lot of comms people are worried about, that it's going to strip away that human element. So how do we keep that in the process? And I don't know that leaders even are thinking about that or even focused on it. So again, going back to Simon's conversation we had about when you're in the room, what are you saying in the room about the role of AI in your organization?
And I think it's just still, and we've talked about this, I feel like for about a year now, about still being in this messy state with AI, in that you're trying to build something while learning about it, and everyone's in the same boat doing that at the same time. Like, I know there are experts out there and there are people that have been doing this a lot longer, but in the majority of organizations, it feels like it is still just quite messy, and we're doing that all at once. You've touched on some stuff there about, what are you doing in the room? What are you saying? And the role of the comms person. And there is this ethical piece for this, which is a bit top of mind for me, because I was just reading some new AI ethics guidance that we're putting out through CIPR Inside for our members. And there was a lot of stuff in there about this human touch piece, which is really important in terms of saying whether something's been assisted or whether who's been involved. But that human check has to be there in order for it to actually work and do what we need it to do. Without that human bit, it's still not there. And I just think it's still not, we're still not getting it quite right. And I think there's still a lot of fear, which is what this is sort of, with that narrative of fear is still there. And I think there's even a fear, if you take your example from your wife around, she didn't ask it to do that, it just did it. Then that's a little bit scary. Like, it's just done it. Like, no one asked. And I think that in itself is scary. Like, even though that's what's possible, it's still taking control away. And that is one of the biggest fears, I think, for humans, is not having that control.
Jenni, that wraps up our articles for this week. Let's move along into our freakouts. What are you freaking out about?
So I am freaking out this week. I was having a little think about this, and I was going to talk about an Instagram account that I adore. But actually, as we got on the call today and you were like, how are you doing? And I was like, my bathrooms are finished. And I'm so excited, which is probably a bit sad. But for the last 4 weeks, we've had our bathrooms demolished and redone, because when we moved in 5 years ago, it was like the only bit we didn't get around to doing. And I cannot tell you how excited I am to have a bath. I have washed in the 4 weeks before you go there. And also, like, play and put all my little stuff in my little drawers and find new homes for things. And I'm so excited. I'm off to B&Q, which I don't know if you have, but we're off there after we're recording this to look at paint. And I'm giddy about the whole thing.
Well, it's good to know that you did shower or bathe in the last 4 weeks. I would assume that it happened. It happened.
Good.
But I didn't see on LinkedIn, like, here's the 5 comms lessons I learned from having my bathrooms redone or anything, Jenni.
Do you know, I feel like I should just have a whole parody account of that kind of crap. But yeah, maybe I have got 5 comms lessons from having your bathrooms done. It's great.
Yeah. Well, my freak out is a very exciting one, and I posted about this on LinkedIn and Instagram, is we have adopted a new senior dog in our home. So we have a new 4-legged friend in our house. His name is Alan. He's a 10-year-old senior pitty. And in his, the image that we saw that was promoted about him, it said a senior with a heart of gold. And we could not have described him any better. In fact, even this morning, we went to his first vet appointment, and we walked in, and the vet tech lost her mind over seeing him because she saw his journey on social media. She saw Taffy's Touch is the rescue here in central Indiana that we got him through. She saw all the posts about him and all these things, and he has just been such a gift to our house. We're thrilled to have him here, and this is what we do. We adopt senior dogs and give them their remaining years the best life they can, and it's just great to have that energy back in the house because we've missed it the last several months.
Yeah, I am in love with his name. Like, when I saw you, when you sent me the message and you were like this, and I was like, oh, Alan, what a solid name that is for a dog. I just thought it was excellent. I don't know many dogs called Alan.
It's just a perfect old dog name. I just really enjoyed it. Yeah, it's just a perfect old dog name. Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like Alan Oram's going to be delighted that we've said that about his name today.
I did email Alan to say, hey, are you cool with there being another Alan in our world? And of course, yes, he accepted. Thank you all for joining us this week. All the articles that have inspired this conversation are in the show notes, and don't forget to rate and review after you've listened. Subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and pass this along to someone you think would enjoy listening or watching, because you can also find Frequency on YouTube. Thank you to my friend Poet Ali for contributing music to the show. We're back every Monday with more news, insights, and opinions about everything comms and leadership in workplaces today. Keep tuning in and turning up.